this will disturb you. You may not sleep tonight. These civilizations out in space are absolutely fed up with that. And let me be clear about this. This is a warning and it is a threat. If we stay on that path much longer, the dangers to peaceful civilizations out in space and other transdimensional space-based civilizations is that it is untenable. So we're at a crisis and we have to fix it. And the way we're going to fix it is by 1992, because we had successfully invited, we don't summon and call or boss ETs around. It's a diplomatic invitation. So let's get our linguistics down here. If you summon someone, you're at Downton Abbey, being the Earl of whatever, summoning the butler to bring you tea, right? We're not summoning ETs that way. We don't call them and they come at our beck and call. That is undiplomatic, it's demeaning, it's disrespectful, and it's the opposite of what we're doing with CE5 contact. That is not the consciousness behind it. The consciousness behind it is an invitation to make contact for peaceful relationship building between species, humans and non-human intelligence. It is not acquisitive. It's not to shoot them out of the sky with an electromagnetic pulse weapon, grab their technology, capture the living beings and put them under bases, or kill them. That operation is 180 degrees diametrically opposite of what CE5 contact teams are doing. I want to make this crystal clear, and I will say it 3 more times during the podcast. It couldn't be more different. And so people with their sort of superficial understanding of this can easily conflate those two, right? Couldn't be more different. They are absolutely not related. In fact, they are at complete opposite ends of what we should be looking at. So the one is an act of kinetic, militaristic, invasive, using psionics, violence, targeting of a craft, hijacking their control system. I'll get to this in a minute. I understand how it works. Moving them into 3D and into range, hitting them with a weapon, bringing them down, preferably in one piece, so they can be studied and reverse engineered. And sometimes the NHI people are killed. Sometimes they're caught living. Sometimes the ones that are captured are nanobiotechnological drones that are not the indigenous ETs, but ones that are very advanced. I've talked about this since the 90s, what is called nanobiotechnology, where you can have a living life form that's actually an operational being. And both ET civilizations have them for security purposes, but so do covert programs, by the way. And those are the guys, those creatures are the ones doing the abductions, the man-made drones or robots, but they're very sophisticated. I mean, some are kind of clumsy robotic and some are very biological. I've talked about this since the 90s. Now, the actual ET beings that often are on these craft, they often do get killed or they get captured. And I've been told by many of these special forces guys who've been in these bases that there's a number of them still in captivity, which they euphemistically call, I like the wordage they use, this to sort of whitewash what's going on, refugees. Well, they're not refugees. They've been captured and they're prisoners of these aggressive military and corporate programs. So those need to be liberated. And we're working on that through a group of special forces guys, which I can talk a little bit about. Now, the CE5 contact is not geared towards any self-aggrandizing purpose. It's not to give you entertainment because you saw a UFO. It's not to get their technology so we can reverse engineer it and then beat the shit out of the ETs with it, which is what the military and corporate programs have done for 70 years. It's to make peaceful contact and develop a deep relationship between humanity, our species, and their civilizations, plural, of which there are many, for going forward in a time of not just world peace, but universal peace. That's why our motto is one universe, one people. And the foundation of universal peace is not shooting each other out of the sky so we can be the big monkey and figure out how to get their technology. That's not it. It's to create a future where we do have the technologies. We already have them. We don't have to keep shooting them down. That would run the planet with 0-point energy and free energy and no pollution, and in a generation eliminate all the suffering and poverty on the planet. Create huge new advances in medical healing systems, all kinds of positive things. And the ETs want that. But we don't have to kill them. We don't have to capture them. We don't have to hijack their aircraft, their NHI craft, and we most certainly don't have to hit them with weapons to bring them down. This is not the way to do this. Absolutely not. It's immoral. It's dangerous. Now let me pivot for just one moment. This will disturb you. You may not sleep tonight. And I've known this for some time. But in the last 2 years, I've had 3 separate people who have been in communication centers at classified bases that have told me there has been intercepted communications from NHI, that they're just about fed up with that nonsense of us targeting them, damaging them, captivating their people, and doing this in a kinetic, meaning violent. Kinetic is another euphemism in the military. Just kinetic is just, casualties and destruction, violence manner. And then that the problem is, because we have these advanced technologies that are psionic and technological, our craft, the ones that we have that are man-made, have pretty much reached almost an indistinguishable level with the NHI craft or ET craft. But by using this technology in an aggressive military and corporate way to simply get more and more of their stuff, their goodies, their technology, which is what all the billionaires want, right? Because they only think one way. How do I become a trillionaire if I'm a billionaire? That's all they care about, right? These civilizations out in space are absolutely fed up with that. And let me be clear about this. This is a warning and it is a threat. If we stay on that path much longer, the dangers to peaceful civilizations out in space and other transdimensional space-based civilizations is that it is untenable. So we're at a crisis and we have to fix it. And the way we're going to fix it is to stand down completely those aggressive weapon systems. Now, one of the executive orders that I have recommended to the incoming president and the Congress is an immediate cessation of the use of those systems that target, bring down these craft through a forced effort as opposed to peaceful contact. So we need to take that sword and all those tools they have, but turn it into this plowshare of open, peaceful contact without the ulterior, selfish motive of let's steal and reverse engineer more of their tech. We've already done that. It's been done for 70, 80 years. We don't need to recreate that wheel. We need to disclose the technologies that already are existing, that are to be used peacefully, not the things that fly, but the energy generation. But we don't need to go from one legacy program to something that would be equally misguided and would be using technologies that are psi-related aggressively or in a way that is forced. There should be no more forced takeover of the craft, and there should be no more striking of them with any type of electromagnetic weapon. So that needs to be done by an executive order and a law passed through Congress, and then it has to be enforced. And the way it's going to be enforced are the special forces guys who's separated from the military, are now ready to work under a law enforcement team in the United States. And there's another team being stood up that could operate overseas. So I'm involved with briefing them, and I'm involved in trying to get them up to speed. But they can't act. My friends, listen. We live purportedly in a democracy. They can't act unless the president and the Congress acts. And because then they would be unconstitutional and rogue, right? So, which they don't want to be. They want to operate under the rule of law and the rule of the Constitution. So we need to write our leaders and explain, please pass the executive orders that Dr. Greer has provided in the presidential briefing document and the briefing document for Congress. Soon, we're going to publish that entire document, except with certain redactions for sensitive reasons, that everyone listening and everyone in the world can read. And it'll be a page turner. It's 310 or 20 pages, something like that.
Dr. Greer, I have a really important question for you.
Yeah.
So I guarantee you there's people listening to this right now who are hearing you say, you know, the ETs have drawn a red line in the sand, and if this goes much further, they're not going to put up with it, and they're going to come here and they're going to intervene. And the people hearing this are saying, oh, fantastic, finally, that's exactly what we want. That's what we've been waiting for. So we don't have to do anything. The ETs are going to come and solve it for us. So could you please explain why we really do not want this to happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that intervention externally by NHI is a worst case scenario, the very worst, because there are already predispositions in human nature to believe that would be a violent invasion, alien invasion. Go look at War of the Worlds. Go look at Independence Day. Those movies were, you know, basically showing what a sort of more frontal, forced disclosure by the ETs would be interpreted as. But beyond that, the whole media, not to mention the UFO world, has already been predisposed to believe that, because beginning in the late 50s and early 60s, once we mastered gravity control and had our own ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, reverse engineered man-made craft, and we started doing the stagecraft, as it's called, of mutilations and abductions, blowing up villages in Africa and South America, everything that we've disclosed about this, it has caused the human consciousness to be predisposed towards the ETs being a malevolent force coming to invade us. Now, these special forces guys coming forward are saying, no, they're absolutely not. The experiences they've had is the most beautiful. The real ET experiences are indescribably beautiful in consciousness and in heart. The problem is the general public has already been brainwashed, because these psychological warfare operations known as PSYOPs that were launched in the 50s are now, 65 plus years in the making. So they've had 2/3 of a century to embed in the subconsciousness of humanity that an alien present is a priori malevolent or demonic or something horrible, and they're coming to invade us. So that's all disinformation, but humans have a proclivity to believe it. Why? Because that's what we do to each other. That's what the Holocaust was. My grandmother was Cherokee. Look at the Trail of Tears. Talk about a Holocaust. This is man's inhumanity to man. We are already conditioned that one more powerful group interfacing with a less technologically advanced group is going to dominate them and destroy them. This has been our human collective conscious experience for thousands of years. So we're both innately predisposed to this, but on top of that, they have staged all these horrible, frightening events, which everyone from the president on down think are actually NHI.
Right.
Most of the special forces guys, remember, all these special forces guys have worked in extremely narrow, compartmented operations as tactical operators or whatever they were. They don't know what's going on in all these other compartments. This is the disclosure mosaic we have to put together, that I'm trying to do, so that there is some context to understand why the decisions are that we have to fix this problem ourselves. The worst case scenario is that the NHI craft and ETs fix it, because it will, no matter how benign their intentions, it will be misinterpreted by and misportrayed by the corrupt corporate media, governments, and the secret organizations that are criminal, that this has been their long-term plan. And Werner von Braun in his deathbed said, the big plan that's going to happen, this was 50 years ago in 1974, and said to Carol Rosin, is that the big long-term plan is to present a threat from outer space as alien, so we can unite the world around this totalitarian, militaristic superstate. That they've spent trillions of dollars preparing people for. And we have to say no to that. So there has to be this mass human awakening to the truth about the issue, as opposed to the false narrative. The big risk of disclosure at all, and I've known this for a long time, is that the minority opinion is going to be what I just said. The majority are already brainwashed to believe the worst. And this you see in comments from members of Congress. You see this from people who are very close to the incoming administration. People like Tucker Carlson, who says, well, these are demons. I was recently on a podcast for Charlie Kirk, who is a religious person, very religious person at Turning Point USA. And I was asked that question. And I said, let me quote Monsignor Balducci, from the senior theologian for Pope John Paul, when I was at his at the Vatican with him. And he said, neither angels nor demons need flying saucers.
That's right.
Right. So people, because all this different phenomena, plural, extra dimensional, other dimensions, NHI, ET, it all gets mixed together. But the CIA and other people who are players in this want that confusion. And in that confusion, they can drive their narrative. So, and that narrative leads to what? World War III. It leads to an interplanetary conflict. And that is an extinction level event by any measure. When you're not talking about nuclear weapons, we're talking about our species trying to fight another.
Well, isn't that what would happen if the ETs were to be provoked into an intervention? It's not like the people running these programs who are sitting on technology that has reached parity with the ETs. It's not like they wouldn't put up a fight, right? So we'd be talking about a massive battle.
Actually, they would not need to do that, and they wouldn't do that. I mean, although we have assets that would make this look like what they're doing.
Got it.
They would instantly, all these systems could be shut down. People have no idea what those capabilities are. It's, people look at too much science fiction. This is not Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever. That, leave that in Hollywood, all right, in someone's basement, where they fabricate all this nonsense. If you understand a little bit about those capabilities, it'd be point, set, match in a fraction of a second. So that's not going to happen that way. What's more likely, however, is that we would then trigger our own man-made craft and creatures that are man-made to engage in all kinds of violent activity. And this they're planning to do anyway. See, this is the other problem. The long-term plan has been to take all these fleets of man-made UFOs, because trillions of dollars, and Lockheed Skunk Works and Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and SAIC and Booz Allen Hamilton and EG&G, all these big corporate contractors for these covert NHI retrieval craft operations. Over 70, 80 years, they've had massive breakthroughs beyond what you can imagine. And so that's why one of our whistleblowers, and when I was doing the briefings for Congress in 1997, he was taken out of the hotel the night before the congressional meetings and taken to a secure location, quote unquote, out in Virginia. But before that, he had met with us and said he had been on an interagency committee where they could hit a button. This is 1974. He was on this committee 50 years ago. We can hit a button, he said, and all of a sudden the skies are going to fill up with man-made ET craft, UFOs. No one's going to know where they are, and they can engage and start doing violent activities, and it will fool everyone in the U.S. government and every government around the world, never mind the press and the media. That's why they started right before all this, right before the new administration, they started doing all this crazy drone stuff. They're sort of giving a little warning. We can start launching all kinds of stuff. And that was nothing. That was just, buffoonery by comparison. So we know what their capabilities are. I do, for a fact. I've seen them. So that's the real danger, which is why, let's pivot back to a point I made a moment ago. It's very important that the current administration, now that they've just come into office on Monday, and the new Congress, move quickly to issue directives to get those sort of capabilities that are human under proper control. Because if they're not, they can launch that false flag operation. Some people call it Project Blue Beam. That's not a term I've heard from any legitimate operative, by the way.
Is there a name to it that you do know of?
No. Okay. No. Excuse me. So, but look, if I have that information, when I have it, I share it. If you dredge this stuff off the internet, I ignore it. Remember, I have 765 whistleblowers I've dealt with over the years that I've debriefed and gotten information from. First-hand people, like the guys just coming forward. They're and by the way, what they're sharing about, people forget, in 2001, we did the National Press Club, and we had people there who were on the retrieval teams in the 60s doing precisely what these guys are talking about having done in the 2000s. It's the same thing. So, the only difference is that group possesses, but are not yet releasing, a tranche of dispositive evidence that are located in secure sites. I don't have them. They didn't want me to have them because they thought I'd be killed. They're very sweet. They honestly feel that if I possessed that, I'd be dead. So, and I appreciate that. I mean, people, there's a real sweetness. They've been very hardened guys. A lot of them have PTSD and other things from their careers, but they're actually incredibly sweet to me, and they've been very kind in many ways. So, and I appreciate that. I'm not trying to blow off the risk of that, because look, I mean, they do have wet work assassination teams. They go after people that have something that's too hot. And what I was told by those guys, we don't want you to hold this hot potato. It's too dangerous.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out the next one right here on the Best of Dr. Stephen Greer.